This is CTO Insights, a podcast on engineering leadership. I'm Katarina, your host, and I'm here to bring you insights from senior engineering leaders and experts on creating a culture of high performance. I had the pleasure to host Sven Peters, developer advocate at Atlassian, and discuss how developer joy drives team performance. We delved into the insights of Atlassian's State of Developer Experience report for 2024, exploring how 69% of developers lose 8 hours or more per week to inefficiencies. We talk about what can we do about it, and Sven argues that developer joy is the single most important factor that contributes directly to the team performance. We discuss concrete actions they've taken at Atlassian and how to track developer joy. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global talent network that connects companies with top-tier tech and product talent ready to hit the ground running. With the ability to introduce a candidate within 24 hours and an exceptional 98% success rate on trial engagements, Adiva offers the flexibility for companies to scale their teams up or down as needed. If you're looking to expand your team, drive momentum in new projects, or need to backfill a role, Adiva might just be the solution you need. Visit adivait.com to get started. Sven, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Katarina.
I want to start with some interesting stats that I read in the recent report at Atlassian. It was focusing on developer experience and how organizations are navigating all of it. There was this statistics that 69% of developers lose 8 or more hours per week to inefficiencies, and less than half of them believe leaders are aware of the issues. So I think there's two perspectives here. Why are they losing so much time? What are the inefficiencies that make them waste time in various areas? And then what are the things that we can improve in an organization to basically have a good communication between leaders and hands-on developers and work with this how to improve the whole working environment.
Yeah. That's pretty significant, right? 8 hours a week and 70%. That's a huge number, or nearly 70%. So we also asked, like, where are you losing time, right? What are the problems in your software development? And interestingly, the number one thing, not surprisingly for me as a software developer, is tech debt, right? Just like there's a lot of code that we have to read through, and a lot of just like historical code that is there and that we have to understand. So this is one thing, I think, that cleaning up the code and making it easier for a developer to browse through the code and find the right things, and not just having these areas of code where we better don't touch this area, right? So this is one thing. Then insufficient documentation. That's the number two thing that developers are saying where they struggle with, or where they lose time. Finding the right information, that is also something that developers pointed out. The one thing that I would love to point out here is, what are leaders thinking where developers, how they can help developers with their challenges. And this is interesting, because leaders think like developers are understaffed. This is the number one thing. It's not tech debt, it's not documentation, it's not that the build processes are slow. It is understaffing. Number two is actually they need to have new technologies. Yeah, we love new technologies, but this is not really the problem. Why we are slow, or why we are losing these amount of hours. And there's a gap between developers and leaders. And this came out of this report pretty clearly, that leaders and developers don't talk too much to each other. And I don't want to blame one or the other. It is just the fact that leaders don't understand the developer challenges. They think just like this is different. There are different things. And I'm speaking to a lot of CTOs these days, and I just like recently had one CTO that told me, you know what's when we actually measure productivity, we rolled out the Dora metrics to all our teams. Big enterprise company, huge company. We rolled out the Dora metrics to all our teams, right? And I thought, so tell me, how did it go, right? Did you find some things and did you improve it? And said, well, we found out that it's not going too well. Well, the Dora metrics show the right numbers, but the developers are not improving because it it's not we just like wrote them out without asking them really what is your problem. um so there's a lack of understanding, and I think like how we can bridge that gap is just like the leaders need to talk more to the development teams, and the development teams, they need to be this open atmosphere, this culture of, yeah, I can share my pain points openly with you, and the leaders to give the developers more room for just like working on those problems also. I think that it's just like it's no one's real fault. I think everyone has to open up to just like talk more with each other, to collaborate more with each other, and that's a problem that came out of this report.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the measurements on leadership level. Dora metrics, they introduced a different standard in measurement, and I think companies started to focus more on, the what matters on product level, basically, and then everything we do as something of service to that value we create. But on the other side, based on this report, you say that 38% of organizations measure developer productivity by hours worked, and then 40% use the amount of code. Around half of both kind of classify this metric as ineffective, but they still use it. How is this? Like, have you had any feedback from developers or
Yeah.
leaders on this topic?
Yeah. We're trying to measure the easy things, right? We don't. It's like you can't just like measure these pretty easily. Like how many hours did developers work? Well, that's just like an easy measurement. Is that measuring productivity? No. I mean, I can just like work for 8 hours and not being productive at all, not doing really outcome driven work. Lines of code, is that measuring productivity? No, of course not. I mean, I can write a lot of lines of code without just like being very productive or work on the right things, basically.
And never
It is
erase lines of code.
sorry.
And never erase lines of code. Because
Yeah, never
oftentimes-
erase like that's even worse, right? Then coming back to the tech debt discussion, but it is so easy to measure these things, and also the Dora metrics. There are software tools that can measure the Dora metrics. It's a little bit more tricky to measure these things, but it is a number, right? And we can just like say, okay, now we have a number. And now we just like, what are we doing with this number? Yes, of course, it has to go down or go up, whatever the metrics just like is better, right? The productivity metrics is better, right? Deployment frequency has to go up, right? But instead of just like looking just like at the numbers, we should talk about, and that's the same thing that I just said. We should talk about the problems that developers actually have and dive more deeper into those areas where they are really seeing the problems. And it's as I said, it's easy to just like set up numbers and just like trying to for the leadership to say just like work on those numbers, then must be better. So your yearly goal is to just like go from 55 to, I don't know, 46 or whatever. However we measure productivity, I haven't found one unit actually how we measure productivity, and we all measure the wrong things in terms of just it is actually the leading or the lacking indicators, right? So leading indicators are those that just like, okay, how good are we in software development? How fast can we just develop? And the lacking indicator would be actually how satisfied are our customers with the software actually that we're creating. That would be just like a good measurement of our productivity. But it's harder to measure, right?
Yeah.
It's harder to measure, and it's maybe 3 months after you delivered the software, and 5 months after you had the idea of a new feature and told just like had your product managers come up with the user stories and all the things. So it's a really, really long cycle, right? And you just like want to have more the leading indicators, measure those, because it's a shorter feedback cycle.
Yeah. So you're doing something differently at Atlassian, and you introduced something you call developer joy. I
Yeah.
want to talk about that. How, especially about the metrics, and how can you put a number, or maybe not a number, but then how can you make that tangible? Because developer joy is, when you hear it, it doesn't sound as something as intuitive.
Yeah,
for
it's
leaders.
it's quite fluffy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just like came from a different angle. Let me just explain why it's not developer productivity, why it's developer joy. Because we think that if developers are happy, at the same time they are also productive. If they work on a great code base that they really love to work with, if they can just like progress fast through the whole software development life cycle, come up with the idea on Monday, implement it on Tuesday, deliver it to the customer on Wednesday, right? This is just like it flows, right? They don't have to wait for other departments to make the decision, or to just like send over the designs, and just all of this just like taking time. The flow is important. And if they build the right things for the customers, and the customer come back and says, yeah, we really love your software, this is when I enjoy my job as a software developer. And this is what we call developer joy. No, it's a super fluffy thing, but we think just like if we make our developers happy and satisfied, they'll also be productive, whatever that means. So we're trying this, and we just like start with the problem that developers have to spark that joy. So first, a measurement. It's a company goal to increase the developer satisfaction. And we were asked like developers, how satisfied are you on a scale from 1 to 10? And then measure this. And we were actually at 64% developer satisfaction, which is not really good. We want to have a higher one. So our goal for this year is to go to 77%, actually. And we were 64 a few years ago, and we increased. I think the latest measurements at the beginning of the summer was around 71%. So we just like we increase the satisfaction. So this is a company goal, very high level. That's a goal from our CTO, actually, to increase developer satisfaction. And we're asking developers regularly in a survey, just like, how satisfied are you? Now, we're not asking just like this because we want to find more deeper out, why aren't you satisfied? And that's where our developer joy survey comes into play. So we're doing regular surveys. In the beginning, we were doing it on a monthly basis. Now we are doing it on a bi-monthly basis to just like see the numbers. But we are asking specific questions like, are you satisfied with dealing with the infrastructure and code pipelines and all of this? And are you satisfied with the tools that you have as developers? And are you satisfied with your execution independence? Because we believe that if developers can execute independently and own a task end to end, they are first just like more motivated to build the right thing for the customer, plus build in the right quality, because they are responsible for maintaining that at the end. And we are asking all those questions like, are you satisfied with those things on a scale from 1 to 10? And then the next question would be, how important is that for your team? Because we have over 300 development teams at Atlassian, and for some teams, dealing with infrastructure is important. For other teams, it's not. So we also ask this question. Out of these two measurements, we're calculating a so-called opportunity score, which shows us, or which we give back to the teams actually to show them which areas should you improve, right? And this is how we just like try to find the problem spaces where our developers have problems, and it's different from team to team. So every team has different challenges because every team works differently, and every team, the Bitbucket teams have different problems than the Jira teams that build Jira. So we just like measuring these things and give that back to the teams to tell them, okay, here are the results, here are the problem areas. Now, just like try to improve that for your own satisfaction, right? You wanted to just like spark that developer joy or bring back that developer joy. So work on your own problems. So this is what we do, and then we give developers, of course, time to work on their problems, to help them overcome those problems. We are also asking developers to try to measure if there's a signal that can just like show that there's an improvement. We're running the surveys frequently, but we also want to see if there's a measure that can show actually that we improve on these things. So one problem that one team had was their code review time. They were just like struggling with a long code review time, and this is an easy thing to measure, just like that, right? You can just like measure the code review time. So this was just like a signal. Were they satisfied with the code review time at the end? That's something that we find out in the survey. If we improve from, I don't know, I think it was 3 days in the beginning to 2 days, is that more satisfying, or do we still need to improve it to 1 day to make it really satisfied? So this is so these two things, like the hard measurements showing are we moving the needle in the right direction, and then the survey shows is a real measurement of just like showing how satisfied are those developers at the end.
So usually the teams are working on finding the solution themselves.
So it's a mix. We give them time to work on working on the solutions for them. Obviously, there is also something that teams have similar problems at the end. And if every team just like works out on their same solution, that's not very effective for Atlassian. So we also have a developer experience team that looks in all those teams and talks to all those teams, and just like say, how did you solve that? Is it something that is actually something that every team can benefit from at Atlassian? So we're also looking at this, and then our developer experience team adds a functionality to our platform that we all work on. So there is this balance of teams solving their problems, and then we have a developer experience teams that takes care on a platform level on making sure that every team is just like working in a bad way. So in the best way. So we had, for example, one team had a problem with flaky tests, and they built this flaky test detector. So it's an interesting thing that when the test fails, right? It's just like, okay, why does this test fail? And you just like dive into the code and you don't know, and you rerun the test, and then it's green and it runs, and you just like said, oh my god, yeah, flaky test, right? So this team actually struggled a lot with that, had a lot of flaky tests. So they built this detector so they don't have to just like self discover that it is a flaky test and it's not just like a failing test. So the flaky test detector was rerunning tests if they discovered a red build, just like rerun the test. If that after 3 builds or 4 builds was green, yeah, it's a flaky test. So flaky test detected. So said that is that our developer experience team heard about that and then implemented that into the platform. And every team can now tick the box and just like say, if I have a new build pipeline, I can enable the flaky test detector. So this is an example where one team started with it, but then we rolled it out on the whole platform, so every team can benefit from that learnings.
I love it. And what would you suggest? Like, I guess this would be different depending on a company scale and size. So how would you recommend for, let's say, a scaling startup to try to incorporate more of the developer joy or developer experience focus, and then bigger companies as well? Where do they start? How do they define these things they need to focus on or measure with the questions they need to ask in the survey? Basically, like a 101 on how to get started with this.
Yeah. Um, I think for small startups, they're pretty aware of their problems in the software development, or they have other problems than what larger enterprises
Mhm.
have actually. I think if you just like have in a startup one or two or even just like three development teams, you don't need to run a survey or something. Just like have a meeting and exchange ideas about just like how to improve things, or that's just like the easy thing. If organizations grow larger, and you have the hundreds of developers, well, that's actually where you should look out and make some kind of surveys and just like find out if your developers are happy or not, to identify areas of improvement. That's actually when things starts, and where something like standardization, we all have to work with the same kind of setup starts, and where we just like have to build kind of a platform where we all work on. So there is this thing in the middle where it's the teams in the middle where it's a little bit like, is it worth investing in that, or can we just like still sit together in one room and discuss the problems, or do we really need to have something formal like a survey, to find our things? That depends. Actually, it's different from company to company. Some have this open mindset of just like, yeah, we improve all the time, and then there's this other mindset of just like, yeah, we have to standardize already. So that's actually when you just like want to ask some questions if your developers are satisfied. We haven't had this for a long time at Atlassian, because we had a very um, open culture of raising concerns, and very autonomous culture of people could just like use the tools that they like to use. Um, and then people were blogging internally about their problems and how they solved it, and other team were just like naturally adopting it. So it took for us a little bit longer to get to the point where it's just like, okay, now we probably want to have something more formal. But yeah, it depends on so many factors. And usually it's the culture one that just like drives you maybe a little bit more towards the, if you have just like a just like open culture, then it's a later ad. But if it's more like closed culture, then probably you just like need to start earlier with that.
I love this because it's very natural at the beginning. So, and you're kind of mimicking that startup experience, the experience you had when you were able to sit down together, discuss issues, discuss everything that's blocking the team. And then as the company grows, you start introducing metrics because you think you need that at, a more serious company that's more mature and big and everything. Well, on the other hand, this is basically the same discussion and openness. It's just in a format that allows for the size of the organization.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the more teams you add, then at one stage you can't actually talk to each other anymore, because it's just like too big, and there's happening something in one part of the organization that doesn't reach the other part of
Mm.
the organization. Basically, that's probably the nature of just like adding more teams.
So, in practical sense, you start with the survey. What are the things that you would like to ask a leader, a tech leader, a CTO at a company that wants to introduce this survey at whatever the size of the organization? What are the things that they need to ask developers to
Hmm.
ensure that they understand the level of satisfaction?
Also, this is probably more kind of a differ from company to company, and from what are you developing and how is your developing culture? If there's no execution independence wanted from the leadership, right? It's a you shouldn't ask that questions. Even though I think like the best teams are the ones that are really just like owning a task from end to end and just are totally bought into delivering the best value for the customer, and are there from end to end. But we actually we looked at surveys. Our survey is by the way is open. You can just like see that it's in our team playbook. You can go on to our webpage and then find the team playbook, and there's our DevX survey, or just like Google DevX survey team playbook or DevX survey Atlassian. You will find that. So it's we just like have it open out there so you can see the questions that we ask at Atlassian. But our developer experience team talked a lot to our developers to find out the most problematic areas that we want to discover, that the most problems that teams actually have, and we put those areas into the survey. Also, when we run the survey, we see actually if the satisfaction is high and the importance is low, then we probably don't need to ask that question anymore because the satisfaction is high and the importance is low. That's just like an indicator that this is not a question to ask. It's also a learning from our side. Do we ask the right questions? So this is also a good indicator to say, oh, this is not a good question. So next time we run the survey, we can replace that with something else. But it's not rocket science. It's just like having a pulse on the developers and find those problem areas, talk to them. That's basically the advice that I can get. And as you saw in the survey that we talked about in the beginning, there is a gap between leadership not talking to developers. So close that gap.
And you mentioned autonomous teams that deliver value end to end a couple of times. I want to focus on that. There's some interesting thing around QA that you like to call quality assistance, and a lot of companies are facing the bottleneck of the back and forth between development teams, developers, and QA engineers. Just sending the ticket to someone else to test, and then getting it back to fix something, sending it again. It has a lot of friction, and reduces counterintuitively reduces productivity. So how do you go about that? Like the exploratory testing mostly, and this mindset of focusing on edge cases and scenarios that are more natural for QA, but not as natural for developers. What are the steps an organization should take to enable this culture?
So for us, actually, we wanted to have the team autonomy, and then, as you said, the QA was a bottleneck for us. So we needed to find a way to educate our developers to become testers, so they can just like self-test their features. And it has not only it's not driven just by the bottleneck of the QA people. It is also driven that the developers should be responsible for the quality of the code that they produce, on the features that they produce. If I'm not responsible for it, and I will just like know that someone from QA will check the quality, I would just like say, I assume this is right. I mean, I want to have good quality features, right? But I assume it's right, but the quality people would tell me, right? And you just like pushing a little bit of the responsibility over to the QA department. But you should be responsible for the quality and for the feature itself. So that was the other motivation that we had. So what we did is actually we are doing feature kickoffs. So feature kickoffs are when the quality person, the quality assistant person, sits together with the developer actually before the first line of code is written. They just like look at the user story, and then the quality assistant person says, "How would you test that feature?" Right? Not unit test, but how would you test that? How would you test the quality of that feature? And then they both just like said, "Okay, come up with a test plan." And through time, right? If you do that more often, you get trained of the quality person says, "Oh, you should test that edge case here with the feature," and then the developer learns how to become a better tester. And that was the whole aim of this exercise, or this feature kickoff that we do, where they sit together. Then the developer goes in, writes a code, takes a test plan, tests the feature step by step accordingly to the test plan, right? And then the developer can deploy without the QA involved, right? So we removed the bottleneck. We increased the responsibility on the developer side for the quality and the ownership for this feature. So it's actually quite a win-win that we do there. It's developers get more happy, they're more responsible, they see the feature, they test the feature, they don't just like have to wait for a QA engineer to test it. They can just like deploy it themselves. Now, there's one step in between where we just like have a little bit of a safety net, and that's every feature that before it get deployed, we just like doing demos, regular demos, weekly demos, and then the QA person can sit in that demo or can just like participate in that demo and say just like, "Can you show me how you would do this or that?" So there is a safety net if the QA person just like wants to, but it's also structured because the demo comes every week. So the QA person, it's not we have to wait for the QA person, right, to just like look at it. It's a demo, and the QA person is in the responsibility of participating in the demo. If the QA person doesn't, QA engineer doesn't participate in the demo, we deploy that feature.
And I know that you're doing pre-recorded demos right now. How is that? So did you decide to not have the safety net, or do QAs participate during recording?
Yeah. So we recently went away from, and it's an experiment that we run at the moment at Atlassian. So we went away from Zoom calls where we were doing Zoom calls and presenting the feature to the marketing people, the QA people, so whatever, right? Whoever is interested in that. And now you're right, we're doing pre-recorded demos. So the developer is just like recording a demo of the feature, which is a little bit like what we wanted to have with demos is actually the interaction, right? We want to have the feedback from the product people, the marketing people, all those questions that come up. But what we saw actually is an increase of engagement by sending just a demo video around. And the thing is, we're using our own tool Loom, and you can just like on the timeline, you can just like make comments on that. So also there, the whole like interaction increased, and you can just like put emojis on there to do reactions to the video. But the whole engagement, we also measured the engagement, and the engagement increased by 50%. So we have actually more people engaging with the demo videos than we had with the Zoom calls. And it really took off. I think we had a goal of, let me just like say it, I think 5,000 demos in 1 year. We are not around the year now, so 2024, 5,000 demo videos. We are now at 17 or 18,000 demos right now already. So it really took off, and there's a lot of engagement. And I'm actually watching demos because the demos are happening actually in Australia, in Australian time zone, and I don't have just like it's in the middle of my night. I don't get up and watch a Jira demo of a new Jira feature in the middle of the night. But I'm watching some of those demo videos, and I'm adding comments to it, and just like ask how would that work with a customer or whatever. It really helps to increase the engagement and have more people looking at those videos.
And back to the quality assistance thing, how long did it take to transition from the previous structure where you had dedicated QA in each team to, and do you have this quality assistant across the board, or is it some teams are still transitioning?
Yeah, I think we started pretty early in 2016 or something with this in very small teams, and we still, some people are adopting it. Some teams are adopting it. Some teams are not adopting it. I think the recent number that I have is like 60% of all Jira teams are using Quality Assistant. I don't know what the rest 40% is actually. If they just like still waiting on quality engineers, or there's no need for, they don't have this exploratory test need. They are more working on backend stuff. I'm not sure about that, but the numbers show that 60% are using this, and it's a constant thing. And I'm not sure if all product teams are Atlassian using this. This is also so typical for Atlassian. Yeah, we have a good idea, just like we roll it out, and a good practice will just like spread because we talk about it in blog posts, on company on meetups, and internal meetups and things like that, and it spreads. It's not that we demand this way of working to all teams. The teams should just like pick what's best for them. That's our philosophy. Of course, we need to standardize on some stuff, but not on this. That's just like the Jira team does it. I don't know if the Confluence team does it, to be honest. Yeah.
Cool. In terms of so there are two questions around communication again between leadership and developers. And one thing is the lack of big picture, which is usually something that is affecting performance very heavily. And you've been talking about the understanding that the product team has, and then the tiny user stories in Jira that go to the developer team, and then the development team has a very different understanding, or maybe has an understanding of the little fragment they need to work on, but not the bigger picture and what they need to deliver to the customer. How does this affect? Have you the performance and the value they're able to create? Because it connects very well to those autonomous teams that know exactly what they're working on and the value they create for the customer. So, do you have anything else you'd like to share about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have an autonomous team, to be honest. But the developers can't do everything. They can't do the user research and say, okay, what's the next big thing that we want to develop. They can't do all the user experience building the user experience prototype to find out how would that flow, right? We have specialized teams, design teams that take care of the user experience. We have product managers that just like do this customer research and find the best solution, just like it identifies the problems that the customers have. We can't just like put everything on the shoulders of developers, because then they would do all kinds of jobs, but the coding part would be very little. But that's what they actually good at writing code, and that's what they love, to write code. So we there's always this balance, but still they need to understand the why, right? Why are we building that? And I see this as a lack in a lot of companies. They take those user stories and just like said, okay, this is the user story. I built that and I deliver it. And then just like at the end, they just like show it to the product managers, or just like said, oh no, that's not the right thing, because they don't understand the why behind it. It's also a motivational thing, right? I want to understand why I'm building that for the customer. How do I help the customer with the feature that I'm working on for the next month? I need to understand the why behind it. So there's a lot of communication. There needs to be a lot of communication happening. We have different approaches to this. So one thing is that first we do a project kickoff where everyone is involved, right? So the product manager, let's say they have identified the problem. Now we're doing a project kickoff. We are in one meeting. We talk about the problem. We explain the why to everyone, to the marketing people, to the ops people, to the developers, to the QA people, to everyone that is involved in the whole software development lifecycle. So they know what's coming. They know why they are building this thing for the customer. They are motivated. So this is one thing. Another thing is that we have a dedicated developer that plays the role of what we call a feature lead. So feature lead is responsible for building that bridge. The why are we doing it and what are we doing? So what are we doing is more on the developer side. So what is actually does that mean for code, for the architecture thing? And the feature lead is right in between. So the feature lead talks frequently with the product managers, understanding the why, translating that to the developers to talk about the what, right? And also feeding back and running those demos to just like show the product people that this is how we implement that. So this is the loop that we have. So we need to, and also the what is just like updating where we are in that whole development process. So this is which we're just like trying to find not on a tool side but on a human side how we can just like connect those teams with less friction as possible. They don't have to just like talk each day, right? And we have this proxy of the feature lead that can do this translation thing. So it's not the whole team needs to talk back and forth. So we're trying to just like have that on the human side. We're trying to optimize everything that the developers understand the why behind the feature that they need to build.
There was something that you wrote about which you call watermelon effect. And I wanted to talk a bit more about that, but I'll let you describe it.
All right. So the watermelon effect is actually we know all that we need to write project reports because we want to update like how far is the project. And you report your project normally in just like colors in green. Well, we're on track. Everything is fine, right? Yellow, not so good. Or red, we are off track. And the watermelon effect is the thing that we tend to tell everyone everything is fine for different reasons, right? It could be just like, oh, it's not safe to say that we are off track, right? So we just like keep it green, right? Or we don't have the right data to identify we are off track, right? I don't know where we are, right? I assume we're on the right track, but I have no data indicating that we are, and no data that indicates that we are not, right? So this is just like we tend to just like report green, green, green. So the project looks green from the outside, but if you cut it open and you look closer to it, it's actually red, and that's what the watermelon effect is. And yeah, that it's a big problem in organizations that you report just like green, 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 and then you come to the end of the project and say, oh, we need to deliver in the next month, but we have to just like push the deadline out to just like 3 months later because we just discovered it's red. But if you would have good metrics before that, or have a more open culture of admitting that we are off track, we need help, right? Then you would have seen that way earlier in the process, for one thing. And for the other thing, it's just like you may get help from other teams to just like turn it back to green and stay on the right timeline. This is what I often see in organizations.
And when it comes to metrics, apart from the survey for developer joy, what else do you use like on product level to understand the performance and the value that you're creating for
Mm.
customers?
Yeah, so I mean, we're trying to get a lot of feedback from customers. So we have in-app feedback, which helps us a lot to just like discover. So if we roll out a new feature, you can add a little bit JavaScript snippet to your code, and then people can rate the feature, but also give feedback, basically, just like textual feedback on the feature
Mhm.
that goes directly to the team that actually develops the feature. So it goes also to our customer satisfaction team, but it also goes directly
Nice.
to the team. And of course, the customer satisfaction team, they get a lot of feedback, so they use some kind of AI to summarize that.
Hmm.
We have an AI agent that you can just like summarize thousands of feedback items into themes. So we can actually see that, oh, mostly people are complaining about performance or user experience or whatever. Um, but yeah, we need to close that feedback loop at the end to just like have that out. That's just like the lacking indicator. If we really solve the problem of the customer, that's super important, that you just like know, you set a metric at the beginning and say, this is where you just like have an idea, this is what we want to reach. Like the I don't know, the feature should be used by 20,000 customers in 1 week or something, right? That's your metric. It's just like a measurable number that you can easily measure.
Hmm.
But then you can just like measure at the end if we reach that and if customers are satisfied with the feature that we built. And
Nice.
all of this is just like the outcome metrics that we need to feed back into the development, to improve the feature. Or if we just like hit it for the first time, great. We're happy, so we can celebrate and drink drink some have some drinks, and like a cake or whatever.
That's amazing. Yeah, I loved what you said about the feedback coming directly to the team that develops the feature. I think that's something that teams usually lack. It's the direct customer feedback, and it connects to the why that you were describing earlier, understanding why we're building it, and then how are people interacting with the feature, and basically the output of your work, and then the direct value that you're creating. You have feedback from it all the time.
Cool.
Great. Well, Sven, thank you so much for your time for this discussion. It was amazing. If there's anything you'd like to wrap up with, feel free to add.
I think the most important thing, and we talked about it a lot, is just like closing that gap between leadership and developers, and actively improve the developer experience. Developers, I mean, they are passionate. We are passionate people. We spend time on open source projects. We spend time watching videos. We go to conferences to learn more about new technologies. We are passionate about what we're building. So it's not that we are not passionate about it. So bring back that joy into our work. And I guess just I can say to leaders, just like help, to spark that developer joy. Don't care too much about productivity. Talk to developers, find out what their problems are, try to solve those things, and you will make your developers happy, and at the end we were productive. And we became developers for a reason, because this job is fun, and we need to just like work on bringing back that fun. And also, it's on the developer side to improve, constantly improve, supported by the leadership. But it's also on the developers; they cannot also just like wait that improvement falls just like from the sky and just like is there. We also need to just like work on that, but still supported by the leadership.
That's amazing. Thank you again, Sven. It was a pleasure to have this chat today.
Thanks for having me, Katerina.